So welcome to another video with Inside the Academy, and in this one we are going to snapshot widgets to the user's gallery on their mobile device. Now this is a fantastic technique if you are looking to kind of customize a little bit of your UI and then you want to then save that to the user's device. Now that could be anything. Now in this particular example we're using a QR code. We generate a QR code, let's now save it to the user's device, and of course you could shape that up however you would like. This is a technique that no doubt you would probably want to use at some point with inside your application. So let's get into the video and let's get cracking. Okay, so you've been watching plenty of my previous content. You're probably thinking to yourself, I've seen this sample before. Well, you'll be absolutely right. This is the FlutterFlow QR code application that produces these beautiful looking QR codes. But in this video, there's something very different, and that is that save code button. Because as soon as I click that save code button, then that QR code is going to be then stored with inside the user's device. And in this case, it's going to be in the photo library. So the great thing about this is that although we're using this sample to save the QR code, you can use these techniques in any of your own applications to save certain characteristics of your UI also to the user's device that this is actually running on. So what's going to happen is we're going to go along here, we're going to hit the save code button. I've got this little component that sort of says that it's being now saved. I can now swipe up from the bottom here. I can go across here into then the photos. I can click on that and there is the QR code all safely then stored inside the user's device. So no doubt there's probably plenty of use case for this type of functionality. Now in this particular video, this is going to be very much a low code kind of walkthrough here because we've kind of got some custom widgets here. We're going to build upon what we learned previously with the sample that we got, so please do check the link in the description. Do grab yourself a starter project and we can walk through this together, and hopefully you'll learn a little bit along the way. And of course some of the recent features has been added to FlutterFlow to enhance custom widgets. So let's now get into the video. Let's now walk through. So as always in my videos, I like to sort of talk about the starter project. The link that is available in the description will kind of gain you access to this particular project in FlutterFlow. So please do go ahead and clone it. This is what you're going to be presented with. On the left hand side there in the widget tree, all of the typical widgets that kind of make up the look and feel of the user interface that you see there. So I'll try to make it obviously style out a little bit to make it look a bit more like a realistic application. But the one that's really important here is this generate QR code. This is the custom widget. This is the one that's going to kind of do a lot of the work for us in this particular video, where we're going to extend that with this additional functionality, because the objective of course is to get users to be able to save that QR code to their device. So if you look at this QR code here, this is the one that as I said, this is the widget, and this is then available here on the left hand side in custom code, and we've got this custom widget called generate a QR code. Now what you presented on screen here is obviously Flutter code here, and what we're going to do is we're going to walk through very slowly on actually enhancing this to have all of the features that we need, because when we're trying to save these QR codes out into the device, that's not something that FlutterFlow supports natively. So we're going to kind of build out this code here, but I'll try and explain as we go along, so hopefully it will kind of be very, very clear. So on the right hand side here, we've got all of these parameters here. We've got the data, so this could be like a website address or a reference number, whatever is going to be then available inside that QR code. That's what we're passing in there as some data. So we've got some styling as well. We've got some kind of like the eye style, the data style. That's really kind of just the look and feel of the actual sort of custom widget itself. And then we've got this indicator here to determine whether it's actually true or false. So you can see here that this particular one is true by default. So of course you can override that if you wanted that to not be square. So we've got kind of got the width and height being passed in as standard here. And then here are the 4 parameters that's kind of referenced here. Of course, as you kind of build out these particular kind of custom widgets, as the more and more parameters that you add here, you just need to make sure you add them over here. Certainly if you have already kind of generated this particular kind of widget, you need to make sure that these two are aligned. And then of course the rest of it is kind of just standard kind of Flutter code here. And then we're here, this is the kind of the widget, the overall kind of widget that we're returning. This is a column. As we know, everything's obviously vertically stacked here. And then we've got one child in this particular example here, which is the QR code itself. And all of these are all very, very specific for this particular third-party dependency that we're using. So we've got this QR barcode sort of dependency that we pulled just from pub.dev, and that's given us this functionality. So we're not not going to actually change any of the functionality of this particular sort of library, but we're going to be introducing some additional libraries that's going to kind of do some of the extra work that we needed to do. And we're also going to put some additional Flutter code in here to then kind of represent kind of the button that the user needs to click on and all that kind of stuff. And what we're also going to do in this particular video is we're going to cover a callback that's going to happen here. So what we do when the button is set up with inside this custom code, when the user hits that particular button, we can then kind of trigger a kind of an action that we can then make available with inside the actual home page of our application, and then we can add in additional actions to then sort of happen once the users actually click the button with inside this particular kind of custom widget. Now that's a pretty recent feature that's been added to FlutterFlow as well, so we're going to walk through that. Okay, so that's a bit of a million miles an hour of what we're going to kind of do. Let's get into the next bit and we'll start talking more about the changes that we're going to make to this particular widget. Okay, before we get our hands dirty and start cutting some code, let's pop over to pub.dev and have a look at the two additional packages that we're going to use in this particular project. The first one is called a screenshot. Just hit enter on that one here. Just select that here. Now, quite simply, what this is going to allow us to do is it's going to allow us to kind of define a region within inside our particular FlutterFlow application, which in this case is going to be a kind of container that's going to contain the QR code, and we can make that then available to then be saved to the gallery. And we're going to move on to another package that's going to allow us to do that. So I'm going to spare you the detail here, but certainly go over and have a look at this here. There's some useful features to this particular package, and we're going to use one of them in this particular video. Now, if I go back here, let's have a look at the next one. We're going to look at image gallery saver like that. Now, this particular one here is the top one we're going to be using. As you can see, I'm just going to select that. Again, we're going to use certain features of this particular package that's going to then save that image that we've got captured, and we're going to then save this to then the actual gallery of the device itself. So again, we're going to spare you the detail, but there's some useful features of this particular package is well worth exploring on your own when you've got some time. So let's now move back over to FlutterFlow. Let's get these packages therefore installed inside FlutterFlow, and then we can start then cutting the code itself. Okay, so back in FlutterFlow, back into our custom widget, let's add a brand new dependency. Hit the add dependency. Let's just move over then to the screenshot. Let's go up here and copy this particular one. Let's go back, and I'm just going to paste that just in here like that. Let's add another dependency in. Let's move across now. Let's go to the image gallery, just copy that, and let's go back and let's just paste that in there. Now, once you've done that, of course, just hit the little refresh, and those dependencies will then be referenced inside our FlutterFlow application. So once we got the dependencies added, of course, we now need to reference them at the top here on our imports. Now, what I tend to do is here, I'm just going to hit the sort of the enter key here. We obviously going to make sure we will do all of our kind of custom coding all needs to be below this particular comment here. Okay, so we can now move back over to those particular packages. So what I like to do is I tend to go to the kind of the example here. Let's find the one that we need. So typically we would need to kind of reference it like that. So just copy that. Let's move back over. Let's just paste that in here itself. Let's move back over again to then the kind of the image saver. Let's go to the example, and of course we can just pull that one in as well. So let's see if we can find, I think it's this one here. Let's just grab hold of that there like that and copy that in. Now, chances are these particular packages will likely going to need some additional ones, so just certainly do check out the samples there to make sure there's nothing additional. We will need to add in some additional kind of imports in here as well. So I'm just going to scroll down a little bit now. So we now need to kind of add some sort of reference in here. So this is kind of where most of the work is now going to happen with inside this particular sample. So we've added this kind of screenshot kind of dependency in there. We need to kind of get a reference to kind of like the controller. The controller is going to kind of provide us access to everything we need within inside our particular widget itself. Okay, so this is going to be called a screenshot controller. That is what is provided by that particular dependency. If you go and have a look at the samples, you'll see that. So I'm just going to type in here screenshot controller like that equals, and then screenshot controller like that, and just put the double brackets in. So that's going to kind of create us a new instance of something called a screenshot controller. Okay, so the third-party dependency that we included, the screenshot, is kind of made available to us a widget that we can actually now use with inside this particular area just here. Now, what this actual screenshot widget is actually providing us is, or is basically saying, is that anything that we put with inside it is what is going to capture as part of that particular screenshot. So here we've got a column, we've got the QR code. So what we kind of want to do is we want to kind of wrap this kind of screenshot around the QR code. Now we need to put a container in there as well. And there's a reason for that, because we don't want to we want to put the container, have a nice kind of white background. If we don't kind of put a container with a white background, then we're going to kind of get this what looks like a horrible transparent looking kind of widget that is going to capture. So I'm going to wrap a container around it in a second. But what we're going to do now is we're just going to put in here a screenshot. So let's just type that in, a screenshot like that. Now we're going to kind of open that there, and we're just going to press enter. Now this is going to have a controller. Okay, so let's type in controller like that, and of course we're going to then sort of select here the screenshot controller from the top there, like that, simple as that. Now we're going to comma that, and then here, of course, within inside the screenshot itself is going to have a child, and the child obviously will be then the QR code itself. So I like to do this a little bit more, sort of slowly kind of build this out a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab hold of the QR code here. I'm just going to do an Apple X here. Of course, I'm on an Apple here. I'm just going to paste that in here like that. Now, of course, the great thing is if I just hit the save up here, if we know that our coding is actually conforms correctly, the syntax is correct, and we kind of got everything set up for us. By hitting save here, we get no errors, and you can see then the visual styling kind of sort of changes straight away. We kind of get the kind of the pretty formatting that it's doing. So we know that our code is pretty accurate with what we've got here at the moment. So of course we've got the QR code, but what we kind of want to do is we want to kind of wrap a container around it. So I'm just going to go to the child here like this, and I'm just going to drop that down here. I'm going to go back up to child here. I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to have a container now. I'm going to open that up. I'm going to hit that down here like that. I'm going to get hold of the QR code again, and I'm just going to then sort of Apple X that, put that in there like that. And I'm just going to put a little comma here and a comma here. And then of course, if I just now save that, we've now got a container now that's wrapped around our QR code. Okay, so next up, we kind of want to like decorate our container. Now, if you know anything about Flutter, of course, and you've been coding Flutter, then you'll kind of know how to do this, but we need to apply a decoration to our container. Again, if you are using FlutterFlow to kind of create kind of these widgets inside the UI, then all this is really doing is writing this code behind the scenes. And I'll show you a little technique in a minute, actually, that might actually help you when you're kind of sort of working in adding sort of like widgets actually into the custom code of actually writing it in the first place. But let's move on and now let's do the decoration. So the way that typically works is within inside a container itself, we have a decoration like that. Now what we have is we have a box decoration like this. And what we're going to do, we're going to open up that. Okay, now within inside the actual decoration itself, we can have a color like that. And of course, what we're going to do is we're going to use our kind of our theme at this particular point. So here we're going to go FlutterFlow like that, and we're going to put a theme on there. Dot of context, okay, and we're going to put a little dot there like that, and we're going to say the secondary secondary, I can spell it right, secondary background like that. Just do a comma. So that's going to pull kind of like the color from our theme in. So you could have primary background if you want, or secondary background, or any of the other kind of themes, sort of styles that you set. You can actually apply them here. So let's move on then and choose the border kind of radius like that. So the border radius, we're just going to do a border radius like that, and we're going to say this is going to be circular like that, and just open that up, and that's going to be of 6 like that. So it just gives us a reasonable kind of like decoration. We just need to put a sort of a comma here, and of course again of the actual kind of the container itself, of course a container is going to have a child, so we're just going to put a child here, do a little colon, and of course that is going to be then our QR code, and I can just bring that up like that. Now if I just hit the save now, then you can see here that's pretty well matched, not sort of thrown any errors or anything like that. So as I said, we wrap the screenshot around it, so we know that everything within inside this screenshot is now going to be captured. The container is going to be, in our case, our secondary background is going to be white, and of course it's then going to capture that, and of course then we've got the actual QR code itself. Okay, so save you the pain of watching me type a keystroke by keystroke, I'm going to paste some code in now, and then we're going to walk through it before we start putting the actual meat of this code in. So you know here, but we know before, as I said, we've got the screenshot here now. That's going to kind of allow us to capture everything that's actually in it. So that's fine. So we're going to come back to that shortly. We don't need to make any more kind of coding changes in this particular area here. So we can kind of just minimize that out. Now we know obviously, of course, a column, we've got this children here, and this is an array here. And you can see here that we've got kind of one widget in there. We're now going to add another set of widgets in there. And I'm going to paste this code in, and I'm going to talk you through exactly what it's doing. So we've got some padding going on here. So we're wrapping a whole padding around it. We kind of got 8 kind of pixels to represent a little bit of spacing now for our actual button that we're going to add in. And then we've got a row here. So we're going to kind of pad out our row here. And you can see here that within inside the row here, we're setting the main axis alignment. So anything that's actually inside of that particular row is going to be centrally positioned. Now, of course, a row can have multiple widgets in it, as we already know. And in this particular case here, we've got this one called a size box. Now, what this is doing is this is basically saying, right, it's creating a wrapper really for our actual button. We've got this button that we've actually created, and we're basically saying, right, this elevated button is going to be constrained by 140 pixels in width by 30 pixels in height. If I didn't include this in here, then what will happen is that button will just expand right out to the size of the row. So we're just enforcing those kind of constraints for our actual button itself. Now, in the actual button itself, so this is just a standard Flutter button. Okay, we've kind of got a child here, which is a bit of text here, which is really just kind of, it's just going to say save code. It's just a very simple kind of piece of text here. And then, of course, we have some styling going on now with inside this particular kind of widget. So we're basically saying, right, here we're getting hold of the FlutterFlow, the FlutterFlow theme, and we're saying of the context as prime is that this is going to pull in our primary color and set that as our background color. We're going to remove elevation out of that. Of course, these again all properties that you should be quite familiar with if you're using FlutterFlow. So we're enforcing 0 elevation, so be nice and flat with inside the UI. And of course, here what we're now saying is any of the text now provide this level of styling to it. So we're saying, right, we're going to go back to our theme. We're going to kind of get the title small. We're going to override it. We're going to set the actual font family itself, and then of course we're going to set the color to be white. So of course all of this kind of sort of styling and stuff like that is all easily accessible for you in another way with inside of FlutterFlow, and I'll show you kind of how you can go into the code. You can kind of pull this stuff out during the design and actually put it with inside these actual custom widgets. So this is pretty well much it. That is all that we need to do in terms from a visual styling perspective. We now need to get into the meat, and we now need to start actually making this button kind of do stuff. So let's now move on to that bit now. Okay, so let's start now working on our on-pressed event. This is when the user hits the actual button itself. You can see here now that I'm just going to kind of paste a little bit of code in here, so it just saves you seeing me a type. Okay, so, it's just gone a bit formatted wrong there. Let's bring that in. Right, okay, so what this is kind of doing is this is now invoking the screenshot controller kind of capture method. And what that's kind of doing is that we've kind of created a reference up here to our screenshot controller, which we've then referenced with inside our screenshot itself. So here is the controller. So by accessing this is accessing this particular widget here. Okay, so just kind of keep that one in the back of your mind. So now I've kind of got a reference to that. I can now say, right, now go and do the capture. Now here it seems like it's putting a delay in here, so looking like it's waiting for kind of like the UI to kind of sort of catch up or do something like that. That's why this delay is here. I'm not entirely sure fully kind of what that's doing, but it seems like that's what it's doing to me. And what it's doing is this async await is kind of saying, right, okay, let's wait for the response to come back from this screenshot controller, kind of pause execution in this on-pressed event and wait for the result to come back before we then continue. And what that is really doing is that's going to return us back kind of like this byte array of kind of like, ones and zeros that we're going to then use to then save as an image to the actual gallery itself. So that's exactly what that is doing. So next up, we then now need to move on and say, okay, right, well, have I actually got an image or have I not? Is it null? If it's not null, then I can then go on and move on and then actually then persist that to the actual gallery itself. So let's now go and kind of cut that code. So I'm just going to say if image is not equal to null, like that. I'm then going to say, right, we think we've now got that particular image because it's not null. We can now start doing something with it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to kind of like create like a formatted date. I'm going to kind of like a sort of tag on the date to the actual sort of file name that I'm going to kind of give it, just so it kind of gives it a unique name. Okay, so it's going to be the date and time. Okay, just paste a line in here. So what this is going to do now, this is going to create us this formatted date, which is just going to be a string. So as you can see there, I've passed in sort of DD, MM, YY, hour, minute, and I'm just kind of formatting at the date time now. So I'm just going to return back kind of just like a unique date and time. So once I've got that, of course, I'm going to then want to then move on now and then apply that to the actual file name itself. So let's now create the file name. So I'm going to say file name like that equals, and I'm going to say sort of QR sort of code like that, underscore, and I'm going to do a dollar symbol, and I'm just going to type in formatted date like that. So that is going to be then represented as the actual file name. So at least I've just given it that kind of that unique name. So now that I've got all of that set up for me, what I now need to do is I now need to call out now to this dependency, this image gallery saver sort of third-party library to now actually do the kind of the saving to the actual sort of gallery itself. So I'm just going to say final result, and I'm going to say equals. I'm going to do another await, because of course we're going to wait for the execution of this to complete, and we're going to say image gallery saver. Okay, dot, and then we're going to say save image itself. Okay, we're going to do a sort of opening brackets there. Now we're going to need to pass in the image itself. So this is what we've got a kind of reference just up above. Okay, this is a kind of like our byte array, comma, and then what we can do is there's some properties on this particular kind of this kind of save image kind of method that's going to allow us to set the actual quality itself. So I'm just going to say 80 here. It's going to be kind of like a JPEG, comma, name, and then of course this is where we just need to then pass in our actual file name itself. So that's pretty well much all that we need to do. So what I'm going to do then, I'm going to make an assumption here that that is kind of been sort of persisted, and we have a result that's come back. And then now, of course, what we can then do is we can then now work on, okay, once we've now saved that image into the gallery, what then actually happens? Well, what we're going to want to do now is we're going to kind of want to kind of trigger a kind of like an action now that we can then hook onto outside of this particular custom widget, and then we can carry on the work with inside of FlutterFlow itself. Now that's using a kind of a new feature that's actually been introduced very, very recently, which will allow us to actually create a new kind of parameter on the right hand side, which will be of type action. And so let's now move on to that section now and start hooking up that particular action, and then we'll come back here and we'll come and add in the additional code. Okay, so we're now ready to add in a brand new parameter on the right hand side, but of course at the moment we've kind of fully loaded this out with code. Now there's a bit of an issue with inside FlutterFlow that if I was to come along now and try adding in a parameter on the right hand side, there'll be a discrepancy. It will identify a discrepancy between the parameters here and the code that I've got here. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to add in the parameter and make sure that that then is applied with inside the custom code before we actually hit the save button. So let's now move up and do that now. So firstly, let's add the parameter in. So just to hit add parameter. Now this parameter is going to be on save action. Okay, so that's what we're going to call it. We're going to change the type. I'm going to move down here to action itself. And of course, that can remain nullable because we're going to check for that nullable state very shortly. Of course, if it's not null, we can then trigger it. If not, don't worry about it. So now that has been added in, we now need to make some changes inside our code itself. So just move over to the right hand side here. Let's just do a character return here, and let's put in this particular sort of parameter here. So here this is going to be this on save action like that. We just need to make sure we put a comma after the true. And then just down here on the final, we also need to do this as well. So we're going to type in final. Now this is going to be a future. And it's going to be, of course, a function. So just do opening and closing brackets. Now do a little question mark here because this is going to kind of represent that this actually could be null. So let's now type in on save action like that and just put a little semicolon there, and we are all good. Now if I now hit the save here, this should all correctly save for me with no discrepancies. Now, if I had hit that previously without putting this in, then this particular parameter would have probably have disappeared. That's certainly the behavior that I've been seeing anyway. So that's all in place. We can just sort of minimize that there, and we are good. So we've now got that available to us, and we can now move back down into our code, and we can now work out what do we need to do now to actually invoke that particular action. So just move back down here. So I'm just going to do an if, and I'm going to say widget dot on save action, okay, and we're going to say is not equal to null, like that. So we know that we've actually passed it in here, and of course we can now invoke it. Now what we need to do here is we need to do an await here, and we're going to say widget, and then we're going to say on save action, like that, and we just need to do then an exclamation mark and then close that in. Okay, so incidentally, I'll just put that kind of exclamation mark here that I've just popped in here. Now, this is really just telling the Dart compiler that I'm pretty confident at that point that that particular on-save action is not going to be null. And it's not going to be null because I've kind of wrapped this not equals to null around it. So there's kind of no misunderstandings between the code and the compiler that that is definitely going to have a non-null value. Okay, so let's now save the widget up the top here, hit save there. It's not come up with any kind of errors or any kind of issues on screen. We can now compile it, so let's now compile that. Now that's going to take a while to compile. Now hopefully, fingers crossed, that's not going to come back with any particular errors. If it does, we can go and sort of seek those out and kind of sort those out. So let's just wait for that to come back. Okay, looks like we've got some errors. That's fine. Let's have a look at that. It's probably my dodgy coding there. Okay, so we got some, let's talk about the screenshot controller. Okay, likely to be a typo there. What else we got going on? Oh, I spelled circular wrong. There we go. Yeah, that's fine. So it looks like I've got some errors. So let's go and crack that. It's all good to have these errors when we're kind of doing a bit of live coding. So you can see here that I've called this wrong. So a screenshot controller. If you probably go and look at the kind of the reference material, that's probably the reason why. So we also spelt the word circular wrong. So where did we use that in here? So probably up on the container, wasn't it? Let's have a look here. There we go, circular. So let's just type in this run circular, like that. There we go. Let's try compiling again. Let's save that. Let's hit the X here. Let's say try compiling again, and let's hopefully see if we've cleared those errors. If not, we'll come back again and we'll make some more corrections. Okay, looks like we've got some more. Let's have a look and see what this is telling us now. So we've got the method screenshot isn't defined for type, but generate QR, tries to find the name in screenshot here. I'm not quite sure. Undefined name screenshot controller. Wow, have I kind of made more mistakes here? Let's have a look here. Aha, so is it looking like I've called this one screens shot? That should probably just be a screenshot. Let's just check here. Screenshot controller. Okay, so that's looking good. Let's hit the save again. Let's go again. So there's nothing like a few little mistakes as we go along. In fact, as I'm looking at it here, I think this actually needs to be called a screenshot, like that. There we go. Hit the save again. Let's just do the kind of the compile again. Is that just going to work for me? There we go. Off it goes. Let's try that now. So there we go. We're just being caught out there by not getting our references right there. That's probably just me thinking I'm getting it right from remembering the documentation. So definitely worth there sort of cross-checking the documentations, at least the examples that you've got with inside the pub.dev. So let's see if this comes back and corrects any more, or at least identifies if we've got any more typos. Wow, okay, so we've still got problems. Let's have a look here. Let's see what I've done now. It looks like we've got a typo here at line 89. So our screenshot controller is called that. How have I spelt that at line 89, or there or thereabouts? It's never super accurate. So, there we go. Is it screen? Oh, there we go. Another typo. There we go. Got an uppercase S. That's what I need. Let's now save again, and let's try going again. Wow, there we go. We're finally there. We've got the little check there. That's what we're waiting for. And just one of a new sort of feature that's come into FlutterFlow, which you may not have spotted, and that is this little preview that kind of appears here. So of course, now that this is all correctly compiled, we can actually preview the custom widget. If you hit the little preview option, then very shortly, hopefully it should render the widget. There it is. So we're getting a kind of like a good representation. Obviously we haven't got the background there or anything like that, but it's kind of showing you kind of really pretty well much what it looks like. It's obviously not functional. It's not going to do anything, but that is looking pretty good. So just a little nice little feature there that they've got inside of FlutterFlow. Let's now move back to the actual page itself, and let's start now configuring up the actions that we're going to now have that from that callback. Let's go and do that now. Okay, so back within then our page, on the left hand side we've got the generate QR code. This is obviously our custom widget. On the right hand side, if I just scroll down here, we've now got this on save action callback. If I just open that, we're now into our typical action flow editor. I'm going to add an action on here. I'm just going to search here for haptic like that, so we can get some nice feedback back if we're running this on our mobile phone. And then the next one we're going to do is we're then going to do an add action. We're going to load up a sort of a custom dialog. So I'm just going to type in dialog here, and I'm going to load up this custom dialog, and I'm going to select the components. I've got one already in this particular project, which is the confirmation save component, and this has got a specific sort of width and height, which is going to be 300 and of course 80 on the height itself. Now what we're going to do, the default alignment is going to be the top. We're going to align with the target widget, so this is just going to be below the actual custom widget itself, so that's good. And of course, we're inside this particular component, we're padding a little bit at the top as well, just to push it a little bit down there. So that is good. We're just going to put any sort of non-blocking activity on here, so that kind of widget is just going to kind of play out, do its own thing, and then if there's any other further actions in this particular action flow editor, then they could be carried out as well. So I've just put non-blocking on there, so that is it. So now if I were to now fire this up now in the test mode, you're not going to see the result of that callback, because this is really designed for the actual web. There's no kind of functionality in here that's going to work on the web itself, because this is all to do with saving and persisting these values to an actual mobile device itself. So you'll be able to fire this up, you'll get to see this particular result, you'll get to see this save code button, but when you click on it, it's just not going to do anything. So please do, if you, depending obviously what plan that you have with inside of FlutterFlow itself, then please do kind of pop up here, and you can download the code itself, and you can kind of run that up with inside Flutter locally. You can push it obviously to a GitHub repo, or you can download the APK. If you download the APK, that will build you kind of like this distribution file, and just if you really want to test that on a real device, then my tip there is to download the APK, use something like Google Drive. If you've got an Android phone primarily, use something like Google Drive to then copy that over to Google Drive, go onto your mobile device, download the APK on your mobile device, install it, and then you can then run the application on the actual device itself. Of course, with an iOS simulator, that's one way of testing the application, but testing on an iOS device is a little bit more involved, because you really need to get the code back down into your Mac to then load up Xcode and kind of get that running with inside the simulator itself, or actually connected to a mobile device, depending on how you've kind of got that set up. So the easiest way to test these things is by having an Android device and downloading the APK and getting that installed. So just before we finish this video, I just wanted to mention a little bit about what I was kind of referencing earlier about kind of getting hold of some kind of FlutterFlow generated code and applying that to your custom widgets. So one little tip that I can give you is that if you move over to the actual little developer menu up here and you go to the view code section, you can see here this is all of the code that's being currently generated for this particular page by a FlutterFlow itself. Now this is really just Flutter code, right? So what you can do is you can kind of come in here and you can sort of look at, perhaps you may, for example, in your sort of custom widget, you might want to apply some padding. So what you could do is you can copy and paste this area here. Here's your child, here's your container. You can kind of grab hold of this. You can kind of copy and paste that into your custom code. So if you're kind of looking to get hold of the themes and all that kind of stuff, you can do that. So long as you make sure that you are referencing these particular, some of these imports. So for example, if you're looking to use the themes within inside your custom widget, then just make sure that you grab hold of things like the import up here. So you can copy and paste that into your custom widget at the top, just to make sure you've kind of got that in there. So there's lots that you can sort of capture from here, and you can kind of move into the custom widget itself. So you just might find that particularly handy in your work. So that's that. They're all good. So that's pretty much it for this particular video. Hopefully you found that really, really useful. Of course, as I said, you can kind of use the screenshot there to capture all different types of widgets that you might have on your particular UI. Again, really depending on what your use case is in your application. But this is quite a good one, I think, that if you were trying to provide the ability for a user to kind of save their QR code locally on their device that they can then retrieve later. And remember, I excluded the save code button from on the actual screenshot itself. But you could, if you wanted to, put a nice big title in here. You could, if you really wanted to, have the whole of this here as a custom widget and kind of make it look a lot more nicer as an image that could be then saved onto the user's device as well. And one more final thing with inside of FlutterFlow as well that you may find that you will need to do if you go over to the settings of your particular project and go to permissions, it's likely that you're going to need to put some kind of message in here in order for the photo library to gain access as far as permissions is concerned for both iOS and Play Store. So just make sure you kind of put a message in here and kind of activate the little toggle there. That's something you're likely going to need as well. So there you go. Hopefully you found this particular video useful. Please do, as always, check the link in the description, because of course you can then download this particular project as a final version as well. And also as well, please do check out the Digital Pros at Nocode Academy as well, because there's lots of good information in there, and of course more of this type of content coming within inside that community as well. So yeah, and of course if you've been watching me on YouTube, then please also subscribe to the channel as well, because there's lots more content coming there in the future as well. So until the next video, I'll see you soon.